On November 27, 2025, in the parking lot of a Walmart supermarket in the Austin neighborhood of Chicago, security guard Demetrius Harris shot his wife and her lover. Keisha Harris and electronics department manager Antonio Williams died on the spot from gunshot wounds. The shooter surrendered to the arriving patrol officers without resistance. Detective Norman Remy of the Homicide Division arrived at the scene 12 minutes later and was faced with a mystery. A quiet family man had killed his wife and colleague in a crowded place in broad daylight. But it all started 8 months ago, when 34-year-old Demetrius got a job as a security guard at a Walmart supermarket on Chicago Avenue. After 3 years of unemployment and odd jobs, this position seemed like a lifeline. The salary was modest, $1,200 a month, but it was stable, plus health insurance for the whole family. For a black man without a college degree and a criminal record for fighting in his youth, it was a chance to start a normal life. Demetrius worked honestly and conscientiously. Tall, 6 feet tall, muscular, with attentive brown eyes and calm manners, he quickly won the respect of his colleagues and customers. He never raised his voice and always tried to resolve conflicts peacefully. Even when teenagers tried to take goods without paying or drunk, people caused scandals at the cash registers. He acted calmly and professionally. Management valued him for his discipline and responsibility. In 8 months of work, there was not a single complaint. At home, his wife Keisha, whom he had been married to for 9 years, was waiting for him. At 31, she had been working as a cashier at the same Walmart for 3 years and was known for her friendliness and professionalism. A beautiful woman of medium height with expressive brown eyes, high cheekbones, and an infectious smile, she easily found common ground with customers of all ages and personalities. Customers often asked for her specific register, even if there was a line. They met 10 years ago at a Baptist church on Madison Street, where they both sang in the choir. Keisha had just moved to Chicago from a small town in Mississippi, looking for work and new friends. Demetrius immediately noticed the slender girl with the beautiful voice who always came to rehearsals in neat, modest dresses. He courted her long and patiently. 6 months of casual conversations after service, joint trips to the movies with other parishioners, walks in the park with friends. "How was your day, baby?" she would ask every evening when Demetrius returned from work to their small apartment on Kinsey Street. Quiet. "Only one drunk tried to cause a scene in the liquor department, but we quickly came to an agreement," he replied, taking off his uniform shirt. "I have a new manager in electronics. His name is Antonio. Seems like a nice guy." Demetrius nodded, not paying much attention to his wife's work conversations. They had a well-established family life, a 2-bedroom apartment in a relatively safe neighborhood, an old but reliable Honda Civic, and plans to buy a house in a few years. Keisha ran the household with German precision. She always knew how much money they had and what they spent it on, kept track of every penny, and set aside a certain amount each month for a down payment on their own home. They didn't have children yet, but they were planning to have a baby as soon as their financial situation became more stable. Keisha was on birth control, but she often said she wanted to be a mother before she turned 35. Demetrius dreamed of having a son whom he would name after his father, James. They were even looking at houses in the suburbs, where there were good schools and safe streets for children to play in. Antonio Williams was indeed the new electronics department manager. At 42, he had transferred from the Detroit branch after divorcing his wife. Of average height, 5'9", and stocky build, with a neatly trimmed graying beard and always impeccably ironed white shirt, he gave the impression of being a serious professional. He had 15 years of experience in retail and a reputation as an effective manager capable of boosting sales in any department. Antonio rented a 1-bedroom apartment 10 minutes drive from the store, drove a used black Dodge Charger, and lived modestly. He sent most of his salary to his ex-wife to support their 2 children, an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. In the evenings, he read books on management and sales psychology, and on weekends he went to the gym to stay in shape. Demetrius first met Antonio in mid-April, when the security guard was passing by the electronics department during his regular rounds. The manager was advising an elderly African-American woman about a smartphone, patiently explaining the features and specifications of different models and showing her how to use the apps. "Demetrius, meet our new manager," Keisha said, approaching them during their 15-minute break. "Antonio, this is my husband. He works as a security guard. It's a pleasure to meet you, Antonio smiled, extending his hand for a firm handshake. I hear we have excellent security. My colleagues have only good things to say. We try to do our job honestly, Demetrius replied, shaking his dry, warm hand. Antonio seemed like a normal, reasonable person to him, polite, professional, without unnecessary ambition or pretension. Demetrius noticed the gold wedding ring on his finger and thought that the new manager probably had a family. Antonio spoke calmly, with a slight Midwestern accent, and looked him in the eye during the conversation. In the weeks that followed, Demetrius saw Keisha talking to Antonio several times during lunch breaks. They sat at one of the plastic tables in the small staff cafeteria and discussed work issues, new promotions, difficult customers, problems with returns. There was nothing suspicious about this. Cashiers often communicated with managers about work matters, especially when there were disputes with customers. Antonio is an interesting person, Keisha remarked one evening at dinner, serving him a portion of fried chicken and rice. He's worked in many places and seen a lot. He tells interesting stories about different cities. Where is he from? Asked Demetrius, cutting the meat. Detroit. He says that the job market there has become quite challenging since the automotive industry crisis. Entire neighborhoods have been abandoned, so he decided to try his luck in Chicago. Does he have a family? He was married, but he got divorced 6 months ago. His children stayed with his ex-wife in Michigan. He pays child support, which is why he moved here. The salaries are higher. Demetrius nodded and switched to discussing plans for the weekend. He wasn't particularly interested in his colleagues' personal lives and saw no reason for concern. Divorce was common, especially at their age. It was good that the man was responsible for his children. Over the summer, Keisha began to mention Antonio more and more often in conversation. He helped her deal with a complicated return of a faulty TV and an angry customer, recommended a good dentist on the north side, and lent her a book on personal finance management. Demetrius noticed that his wife became more animated when she talked about work. He's very educated, Keisha said as she cleared the table after dinner. He studied business administration in college for 2 years, then served in the army for 4 years. He was in Afghanistan. He reads a lot of books, knows a lot about politics, and understands economics. It's good that you have a colleague like that, Demetrius replied, genuinely happy that his wife had found someone at work with whom she shared common interests. It's useful to talk to people who can teach you something. Demetrius himself was not particularly well educated. He barely graduated from school, did not serve in the army, and read mainly sports magazines and detective stories. If his wife could gain new knowledge from a more experienced person, it could only be for the better. In early August, Keisha suggested inviting Antonio to a barbecue for Demetrius's birthday. They decided to celebrate his 34th birthday in the backyard of their house with a small group of people. A few friends from church, neighbors Ronald and Brenda, and co-workers. Demetrius was not a fan of big parties, preferring small gatherings with people he knew well. He hardly knows anyone in town, Keisha explained. He just moved here and hasn't made any friends yet, but he's such a nice guy. Everyone will like him. Sure, invite him, Demetrius agreed. Just warn him that we're a simple bunch, no pretensions. Antonio arrived right on time at 7 p.m. with a bottle of expensive Jack Daniel's whiskey and a beautiful bouquet of flowers for Keisha. Thank you very much for inviting me, he said, shaking hands with the birthday boy. It's rare to get to spend time in such pleasant family company. I brought a gift. He took a set of barbecue tools out of the bag. Tongs, a spatula, and a fork with long handles. Keisha said you like to cook meat over charcoal. This is a professional set. It should last a long time. The gift was practical and expensive. Demetrius had seen such sets in stores for $120. He was touched by such attention from a man he didn't really know. Antonio quickly became the life of the party. He told funny stories from his army service, how he repaired equipment in the Afghan mountains, how he studied local customs, how he learned to cook national dishes. He skillfully managed the grill while Demetrius went into the house for extra plates, correctly turning the steaks and sausages and monitoring the temperature. He kept up conversations on any topic, from sports to politics, from raising children to budgeting. Your colleague is a great guy, Ronald, Demetrius's neighbor, said to him as they stood by the grill with beers in their hands. He's interesting to talk to. He's educated and has traveled a lot. Yes, he's a good man, Demetrius agreed, watching Antonio make a group of women laugh with a story about army cuisine. It's a shame we didn't meet him sooner. Keisha was also delighted with the evening. She flitted among the guests in her new blue dress, kept an eye on the refreshments, filled glasses, and Demetrius noticed how animatedly she talked with Antonio, how often she laughed at his jokes, how attentively she listened to his stories. But there was nothing strange about that. She had always been a good hostess, skilled at creating a warm atmosphere. "Thank you for inviting him," Demetrius said to his wife, as the last guests left around midnight and they cleared the table. "He's a really interesting person, and he chose a great gift." "I told you," Keisha smiled, putting the dirty plates in the dishwasher. "He's lonely. He needs to socialize more with good people. Otherwise, he just sits at home with his books all evening." After his birthday, Antonio began to visit them more often. Sometimes he would watch football with Demetrius. He was a Bears fan, like the host. Sometimes he would help Keisha figure out the new smartphone she had bought at a discount. And sometimes he would just have dinner with the family when he got tired of the loneliness of his bachelor apartment. Demetrius was genuinely happy that they had a new friend, especially one so reliable and decent. After many years of his social circle being limited to work and church, the appearance of an interesting conversation partner was a pleasant change. "The Bears are playing the Packers tomorrow," Antonio said, as he walked in on Sunday. "Can I watch it at your place? My TV is too small, it's not the same." "Sure," Demetrius replied. "Keisha will fry some wings, we'll buy beer, like proper fans." They watched the game, yelled at the referees, discussed the coach's mistakes, and Demetrius felt happy. His wife was bustling about in the kitchen, his friends shared his sporting interests, and the house was full of warmth and comfort. In September, Keisha said that Antonio had offered her a part-time job. "He's setting up a small business selling electronics online," she explained, sitting on the couch with her laptop on her lap. "He buys phones and tablets in bulk and sells them retail through a classifieds website. He needs someone who understands technology and knows how to communicate with customers. A couple of hours a day after my main job." "That's a good idea," Demetrius agreed. "The extra money won't hurt, especially if we want to buy a house." "Really? I thought you'd be against it. A lot of men don't like it when their wives have side jobs." "Why would I be against it? Antonio is a decent person, and you know more about electronics than I do. What's wrong with that? He promises $300 a month. If things go well, maybe even more." $300 was a quarter of Keisha's salary, a significant amount for their family budget. With this money, they could save up for a down payment faster or improve their quality of life. The side job started in early October. Keisha began staying after work for an hour and a half to help Antonio with online sales. According to her, they met in a small office he rented on Madison Street, sorted orders, packed goods, and answered customer questions over the phone. She came home tired but satisfied. She talked about how many phones they sold that day, which models were in demand, and what problems arose with delivery. The extra income was indeed about $300 a month, and Keisha carefully put that money into a separate account. "How's the business going?" Demetrius would ask at dinner. "It's going great. Antonio says we'll be able to scale up in 6 months. Maybe we'll even open our own little shop somewhere downtown. Does he mind that you're married?" Some employers don't like married people. They think that home life distracts from work. On the contrary, he says that married people are more responsible and reliable. They are more motivated. They have to feed their families. Demetrius was pleased with his wife's success. The extra money allowed them to save more for the down payment on a house, and their dream of owning their own home with a garden was becoming more and more real. At the current rate of savings, in 2 years they would be able to buy a small house in a decent neighborhood. He even thought about finding a side job, maybe working as a night security guard in an office or shopping center. But he decided not to rush into anything. It's hard for one person to juggle 2 jobs, and family time is also important. In November, Demetrius noticed a change in Keisha's behavior. She became more distracted at home, often pausing in the middle of a conversation, forgetting what she was going to say. She spent significantly more time on her phone, texting, talking, researching something on the internet. When Demetrius asked who she was talking to, she replied that it was with customers about orders or with suppliers about new shipments of goods. "This business takes a lot of time and energy," he remarked one evening when Keisha had been glued to her screen for half an hour. "But it brings in good money," she replied, without looking up, "and the prospects are excellent. Antonio says that by the new year, turnover will double. Everyone will be buying electronics as gifts. Maybe you should find a balance between work and home. Right now, you're physically present, but your mind is somewhere else. Don't be dramatic, Demetrius. It's just the busy season right now. Everyone is buying appliances for the holidays. Things will calm down after January. He decided not to insist. Everyone has periods when work requires increased attention and concentration. The main thing is that the extra income is actually coming in. A week later, Demetrius accidentally overheard Keisha talking on the phone. She was standing on the small balcony of their apartment and speaking very quietly, but the autumn wind carried a few phrases into the room. "I can't talk right now. He's home and might hear. Let's meet early tomorrow. Me too." When she returned to the living room, Demetrius pretended to be watching TV and casually asked, "Who called so late?" "Antonio." "There's a problem with a large order. We had to discuss the details urgently," Keisha replied, but her voice sounded tense. "He's discussing work issues at 10 o'clock at night? The client has a special work schedule. He's busy during the day and can only talk late at night. It's a big order, 15 phones for the office." The explanation sounded logical, but something about his wife's behavior was alarming. She avoided looking him in the eye and quickly switched to discussing plans for the weekend. The following week, Demetrius decided to test his growing suspicions. He told Keisha that he was staying late at work to conduct an inventory check in the warehouse. Supposedly, additional security was needed while the counting commission checked the goods. He parked on a neighboring street and began watching the exit from Walmart. Keisha left the store at her usual time, 5:30 in the evening. But instead of going to the bus stop at the corner of Chicago Avenue and Larrabee Street, she headed to the far end of the parking lot, where Antonio's black Dodge Charger was parked among hundreds of other cars. She got into the passenger seat, they talked about something, and the car drove away from the store. Demetrius started his Honda and cautiously followed them, keeping a few cars' length behind. The Dodge drove down West Chicago Avenue toward the outskirts, then turned onto Kinsey Street and stopped at the Small Star Motel, a one-story building with peeling paint and a flashing neon sign. Demetrius parked across the street behind a delivery van and watched. Keisha and Antonio got out of the car and entered one of the rooms, number 14, according to the sign on the door. The world around Demetrius blurred and swayed. The wife whom he trusted more than anyone else in the world, whom he had loved for 9 years, who had sworn fidelity before the altar, was cheating on him with a man he considered a friend. There was no internet business, just plain old cheating. Demetrius arrived home before his wife and sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to collect his thoughts. When Keisha appeared at 8:30, he forced himself to make small talk. "How did the inventory go?" she asked, hanging her jacket in the hallway. "Fine, but it took a long time." "A lot of merchandise has accumulated," he replied, studying her face intently. "How did your orders go?" "There was a lot of work. Antonio says it will stay this busy until New Year's." She lied to his face without even flinching, blushing, or her voice wavering. Demetrius realized that the woman he had lived with for 9 years had become a complete stranger. The next 2 weeks were pure torture. Demetrius tried to act normal, but inside he was burning with pain, humiliation, and rage. Every mention of Antonio's name was like a knife to the heart. Every lie about her mythical side job tore his soul apart. Every touch from his wife was repulsive. Those hands caressed another man. He saw them together several times at work, in the staff cafeteria, in the corridors between departments, in the parking lot after their shift. Antonio was professional and reserved, but Demetrius now noticed details that he had previously overlooked. How the manager's gaze lingered on Keisha's figure. How she smiled at him with a special smile, not like she did to other colleagues. How they stood a little closer to each other during conversation than is customary between mere acquaintances. Twice Demetrius was about to confront his wife, but stopped at the last moment. He was afraid to hear the truth, afraid that she would confess her love for another man, afraid that their 9-year marriage would turn out to be an empty formality that she maintained only for convenience. Or maybe Antonio wasn't the first. Maybe she had cheated on him before, but he was too trusting and foolish to suspect anything. On November 27, Demetrius finished his shift at 2 p.m. instead of the usual 4 p.m. He asked his colleague Marcus to cover for him for the last 2 hours, saying he wasn't feeling well. He had a headache. Maybe the flu was coming on. He got into his Honda and drove home, but halfway there he changed his mind. Something made him turn around, go back to Walmart, and park in the far corner of the parking lot, where he had a good view of the area around the black Dodge. At 2:30, Keisha's workday officially ended. Demetrius saw her come out of the store's service entrance and, looking around, head not for the bus stop, but exactly where he had expected, to Antonio's car. The manager was waiting for her, leaning on the hood of the car and smoking a cigarette. When Keisha approached, he threw away his cigarette butt, put his arm around her waist, and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss on the cheek, but a long, passionate kiss on the lips. Demetrius got out of the Honda and slowly walked across the parking lot toward them. In his jacket pocket was a .19 caliber Glock pistol, a personal weapon he had bought a year ago to protect his home after a series of robberies in their neighborhood. The license was properly registered. He regularly visited a shooting club on the north side and was an accurate shot. Keisha was the first to notice her husband approaching. Her face instantly turned pale, her eyes widened in horror, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. "Demetrius, it's not what you think. We were just..." "What could I possibly think?" he asked calmly, taking a gun out of his pocket. Antonio straightened up abruptly and instinctively took a defensive step forward, shielding Keisha. "Listen, bro, let's talk calmly, like adults." "Don't you dare call me bro," Demetrius said, and shot him straight in the heart from a distance of 2 meters. Antonio fell onto the cold asphalt of the parking lot, his arms spread wide. Keisha screamed piercingly and tried to run to the main entrance of the store, but a second shot caught up with her after a few steps. The bullet hit her in the back, and she fell face down between 2 parked cars. Demetrius stood in the middle of the parking lot with a smoking gun in his hand, unable to believe what had just happened. People began to gather around, shoppers and store employees. Some were screaming, some were crying, and some were already calling the police and an ambulance on their cell phones. "Drop the gun," shouted a security guard from a neighboring store. "Step away from the weapon and raise your hands." When patrol officers James Coleman and Maria Vasquez arrived 5 minutes later, Demetrius calmly placed the Glock on the ground and clasped his hands behind his head. "My name is Demetrius Harris," he said in an even voice. "I just shot my wife, Keisha, and her lover, Antonio Williams. I didn't touch anyone else." Detective Norman Remy received a call about the double homicide at 3 o'clock in the afternoon as he was finishing up paperwork on a car theft case on South. A 47-year-old African-American with graying temples and piercing brown eyes, he had been with the Chicago Police Department for 23 years, the last 11 of which he had spent investigating homicides. During that time, he had seen all kinds of crimes motivated by passion, jealousy, and revenge, but family dramas in crowded parking lots were rare. The drive to the Walmart supermarket on Chicago Avenue took 18 minutes in heavy afternoon traffic. The dispatcher relayed additional information over the radio. The shooter had voluntarily surrendered his weapon, the victims had died at the scene, and there were numerous witnesses. Ramey frowned. Most family murders took place at home, in an intimate setting where pent-up resentment was vented. A public execution suggested a sudden outburst of uncontrolled rage. The parking lot was in controlled chaos. Patrol cars with flashing lights blocked the driveways. Yellow tape cordoned off the scene. The police and crowds of shoppers and onlookers gathered outside the perimeter. Captain Michael Bronson, a heavy-set Irishman with a reddish mustache and tired eyes, met Detective Ramey at the entrance to the premises. "The situation is simple and complicated at the same time, Norman," he said, leafing through his notebook. "Demetrius Harris, 34 years old, security guard at this store, shot his own wife, Keisha, and manager Antonio Williams in front of 50 people. He surrendered to the patrol officers without resistance and confessed to the crime. The motive? He claims that his wife was having an affair with the manager. He says he caught them kissing in the parking lot and couldn't control himself. Where is the shooter now? He's being taken to the station. He's calm, hardly talking. He just keeps repeating the same thing. They've been cheating on me for months." Remy examined the scene of the tragedy. 2 bodies lay at different distances from each other between rows of parked cars. Antonio Williams was sprawled next to the driver's door of a black Dodge Charger, his white shirt soaked with blood. Keisha Harris was 8 meters away from the car. Apparently she was trying to run to the main entrance of the store when she was shot. Forensic expert Michael Torres, a thin Mexican man with a neat beard, had been photographing and measuring the trajectories of the shots for 2 hours. Torres had been with the department for 12 years and was considered one of the best ballistics experts in the city. "What does the initial examination show?" Remy asked. "A classic case of a crime of passion," replied the expert, without looking up from his work. The first shot was fired at the man from a distance of 1.5 to 2 meters, straight to the heart. The shooter knew what he was doing, a precise hit, no wasted shots. The second shot hit the woman when she was already running, a distance of 5 or 6 meters. The weapon? A .19 caliber Glock, lying next to the man's body. Harris put it there himself. 2 shell casings were found. I'll send them for examination, but there's no doubt this gun was used. Remy began questioning witnesses. Shopper Teresa Garcia, a 42-year-old housewife, was loading grocery bags into the trunk of her minivan in the next aisle. I heard loud voices and turned around. A tall black man was walking quickly toward a couple standing near a dark car. The woman was shouting something, waving her arms, and the man by the car was also saying something, but I couldn't hear him. Then bang, and the guy fell down. The woman ran and bang. What a horror. Loader Ricky Johnson was collecting carts near the scene. Dem is a good guy, calm. In 8 months, I never once saw him yell at anyone or raise his hands. He was always polite, even to the most brazen thieves. And those two, well, everyone could see there was something between them. Keisha had been glowing lately, like a schoolgirl in love. Shift manager Dolores Washington, who has worked at Walmart for 15 years, confirmed her colleagues' suspicions. Keisha and Antonio were too friendly for just co-workers. They had lunch together every day and talked for a long time in the parking lot after work. She even started dressing differently, brighter, more stylish. She had new jewelry and an expensive handbag, and her husband didn't notice anything. He was very trusting. Remy decided to inspect the victims' workplaces. In the office of the electronics department manager, Antonio found printouts of advertisements for apartments in prestigious areas of the city, spacious apartments for $1,500 to $2,000 a month. In the desk drawer were advertising brochures from furniture stores and catalogs of household appliances. Clearly, plans were being made to furnish a new home. Upon examining Keisha's personal purse, Remy discovered 2 cell phones. The main one was an iPhone, and the second was a cheap Android in a secret pocket. In this phone, Remy found extensive correspondence with a contact named My Prince. Judging by the content, it was Antonio. The messages from the last few months left no doubt about their romantic relationship. Counting down the minutes until we meet. Dem doesn't suspect a thing. He's so naive. You've changed my life, my dear. Phrases like these were repeated constantly. The last correspondence was dated the morning of the tragedy. My Prince at 7:30. Make your decision today. I can't wait any longer. Keisha at 8. It's scary, but I'm ready. I'll do anything for us. My Prince at 8:30. We'll meet as usual after your shift. And no more secrets. Keisha sent her last message at 2:45. I'm coming to you. I love you. The next morning, Riami questioned Demetrius Harris in the interrogation room of the Central Police Station. In the presence of his appointed attorney, Stephen Clark, the suspect looked crushed. He hadn't shaved since his arrest. His eyes were red from insomnia, and he spoke quietly and slowly. Tell me how you found out about your wife's affair, Remy asked. I noticed changes about 2 months ago. Keisha became different. She was smiling all the time, dressing up, and never leaving her phone alone. She said she was helping a new manager with additional projects, earning some extra money. I was happy. Extra money wouldn't hurt. What made you suspicious? One day she came home very late and said they had been delayed with reports, but she looked satisfied, happy, not like someone who had been working hard, and she was wearing new, expensive perfume. I started watching her. And what did you see? Demetrius fell silent and clenched his fists. I followed her after work. She didn't go home, but to a motel on Kinsley Street with Antonio. How many times did you follow them? 4 times in 2 weeks. Always the same thing. The motel, 2 hours, kisses goodbye. 9 years of marriage, and she's with the first man she meets. Harris's voice broke. The lawyer put his hand on his shoulder. Why didn't you talk to your wife openly? Remy continued. I was afraid. I thought maybe she would confess and ask for forgiveness. And then I realized why. She's a master liar. She fooled me for months. What would a conversation change? Tell me about the day of the murder. I asked a colleague to cover for me, saying I wasn't feeling well. I drove home, but on the way I decided to check again. I parked so I could see the parking lot. And what happened next? Demetrius took a deep breath. Keisha came out of the store and walked to his car. He was waiting for her, leaning on the hood. When she approached, they hugged and started kissing right there, in front of everyone. And something inside me broke completely. Did you bring the gun on purpose? No, I always carry a gun. I bought it for self-defense. I have a license. I just walked up to them and I don't really remember. I came to when the police arrived. Ramey examined the victim's financial records. Keisha's bank statements showed regular cash deposits of $300 to $400 per month for the last 4 months. She explained to her husband that the money was from additional work with Antonio, but there were no documents to support this. Ramey checked the Star Motel on Kinsey Street. The manager, Carlos Sanchez, an elderly Puerto Rican, immediately recognized the photos. This couple has been renting a room twice a week for the last 3 months. The man paid cash for 2 hours and said they were husband and wife. But they had different wedding rings and behaved like teenagers in love, not like a long married couple. How exactly? They were always hugging, laughing, whispering. The woman was always dressed up in expensive dresses. The man bought flowers and brought gifts in beautiful packaging. The last time he said they would soon be moving to a better apartment. It's a pity you have to clean after every guest, Ramey sighed. Which room did they stay in? Number 18. They always ask for that one. Yes, we clean after every guest, but they were here the day before yesterday, and our maid Maria has been sick for 3 days. The room is still uncleaned. In room 18, forensic experts found the fingerprints of both victims, hair on the bedding, and traces of bodily fluids. DNA analysis confirmed regular intimate contact between Keisha and Antonio. During a search of Antonio's apartment on West Madison, Ramey found a personal diary of the murdered manager. The latest entries reveal the true nature of their relationship. October 15th, Keisha is almost ready to take the decisive step. A little more pressure and she will leave her loser husband. Women always dream of a prince on a white horse. November 22nd, found a great apartment on Lakeshore Drive. We can move in a week. It's time to give her an ultimatum. Either she makes up her mind or I'll find someone else. November 27th, morning. Today everything will be decided. Either Keisha leaves her husband for good or our relationship ends. I'm tired of playing secret dates. Medical examiner Dr. Robert King performed an autopsy and confirmed the cause of death. Antonio died instantly from a gunshot wound to the heart. Keisha was shot in the lung and could have survived with prompt medical attention, but she lost too much blood. An interesting detail, the expert told the detective. The woman's stomach contained the remains of a very expensive dinner: lobster, white wine, truffles. She ate 2 or 3 hours before her death. The man had only coffee and a sandwich from a vending machine. Ramey checked the restaurants in the area and found a place where Keisha had her last meal. At the upscale Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, waitress Ashley Davis remembered an unusual customer. A beautiful woman came in alone at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and ordered lobster and a bottle of Chardonnay for $120. She ate slowly, smiling constantly and looking at her phone. When I brought the bill, she said, "Today is a special day, a new life is beginning." She left a $50 tip. The total bill was $170, almost half of the cashier's monthly salary. Keisha was clearly celebrating an important decision. Ramey researched Antonio Williams' past. After contacting Walmart's Human Resources Department in Detroit, he learned the truth about the manager's transfer. He had left his previous job after a 25-year-old employee, Cheryl Brown, complained of harassment. "We offered him the opportunity to resign voluntarily," said HR Representative James Wilson. "The company didn't want a scandal, but this guy was a real predator. He specialized in married women and promised them the moon." A notebook was found among Antonio's personal belongings with a list of promising employees and notes about their marital status, financial problems, and weaknesses. Keisha was listed as number 3 with the note. Ambitious, dissatisfied with her modest life, easily swayed by compliments. A survey of the Harris family's neighbors confirmed the version of Keisha's changed behavior. Elderly neighbor Albert Jackson noted, "In recent months, she has started dressing like a movie star. New outfits every week, gold jewelry, expensive shoes. And Dem works for pennies. Where does the money come from?" Now it's clear. Neighbor Gladys Moore added, "Keisha came home late and left an hour earlier than usual in the morning. Demetrius asked me if I knew where she was going. I feel sorry for him. An honest man caught up with a deceiver. Phone records revealed the extent of the affair. Over 4 months, the lovers had 412 conversations totaling 87 hours. They called each other daily, sometimes several times a day. Analysis of their correspondence revealed the evolution of their relationship, from business contacts to planning a future together. In September, Antonio wrote, "You deserve a better life than with this loser." In October, "Soon we'll be together every day." In November, "Stop hiding, it's time to make a decision." The final correspondence on the day of the murder looked like a romantic drama. Antonio at 7 a.m. "Are you ready to change your destiny?" Keisha at 7:30 a.m. "Yes, my dear, I'll do anything for you." Antonio, "Then I'll see you at the usual time. After today, no more secrets." Keisha at 2 p.m. "I'm on my way to you. I'm nervous, but happy." Rami compiled a detailed chronology of the day of the tragedy. In the morning, Keisha received a final ultimatum from her lover. At lunchtime, she treated herself to a farewell meal at an expensive restaurant, a symbol of the end of her former life. After work, she went to Antonio to announce her readiness to leave her husband. At that moment, Demetrius caught them. Rami carefully analyzed all the case materials. The picture of the crime was crystal clear. A jealous husband caught his wife with her lover and killed them both in a fit of rage. The evidence was irrefutable. The motive was obvious, and the suspect confessed. All that remained was to transfer the case to the prosecutor's office and prepare for trial. A month after the arrest, Rami conducted his final interrogation of Demetrius. He had lost a lot of weight in prison. His hair had turned grey, and his gaze had become detached. "The trial will begin soon," Rami said. "Do you want to add anything to your testimony?" "What is there to add?" Harris replied quietly. "I killed 2 people. I deserve my punishment. The lawyer will insist on mitigating circumstances. Your wife's infidelity, emotional stress. Nothing justifies murder. I understand that. It's just that at that moment, I wasn't thinking straight." Demetrius fell silent and stared at the floor. The trial of Demetrius Harris began on March 14, 2026, in the Chicago County Courthouse, presided over by Judge Richard Thompson. The courtroom was packed with journalists, relatives of the parties, and curious members of the public. The story of marital infidelity and bloody revenge had attracted the attention of the local media. The prosecution was represented by Assistant District Attorney Victoria Anderson, a stern 50-year-old woman with a reputation as a relentless crime fighter. The defense was led by attorney Stephen Clark, who specialized in crimes of passion. The defendant was charged with first-degree murder of 2 persons with aggravating circumstances. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Prosecutor Anderson began her opening statement. "You are presented with a case of double murder. Demetrius Harris shot 2 unarmed people in a crowded parking lot in broad daylight. Yes, his wife was cheating on him. Yes, that's painful. But civilized people in such cases file for divorce. They don't reach for a gun." In his closing argument, defense attorney Clark emphasized the emotional state of the defendant. "My client learned of his wife's 4-month affair in the most brutal way possible. He saw her in the arms of her lover. His psyche couldn't take the blow. This was not a premeditated murder. It was the reaction of a man in a state of acute emotional distress." Detective Remy was the first witness for the prosecution. He methodically outlined the course of the investigation, presented all the evidence gathered, and showed the jury photographs from the crime scene and the lovers' correspondence. The defendant had been watching his wife for 2 weeks, the prosecutor emphasized. This indicates planning, not sudden passion. He was trying to understand what was going on, the defense attorney objected. Any husband would have checked his suspicions. Ballistics expert Michael Torres described the nature of the wounds. 2 shots, both fatal. The first was to the heart at close range. The second was to the back of a woman who was running away. The defendant knows how to handle a weapon and shot accurately. Medical expert Dr. King described the last moments of the victims' lives. Antonio Williams died almost instantly. Keisha Harris bled to death within a few minutes. With timely medical attention, she could have been saved. Eyewitnesses gave detailed testimony about what happened. Shopper Teresa Garcia could not contain her emotions. The woman shouted something like, "Wait, let me explain," but he just shot her. And when she ran, he shot her in the back. It was scary to watch. Walmart employees talked about the personalities of all three. Shift manager Dolores Washington described Keisha and Antonio's romance. In recent months, they were always eating lunch together, whispering in corners, laughing. It was clear that there was something serious between them. Keisha became more attractive, started dressing up, and wore new jewelry. Loader Ricky Johnson described the defendant. Demetrius was a calm guy who avoided conflict. He didn't even beat up thieves, he just persuaded them to return the goods. I still don't understand what happened to him that day. All of his colleagues described Demetrius as a reliable, even-tempered person who never showed aggression. The victim's relatives gave emotional testimony. Keisha's mother, Gloria Harris, wept in the courtroom. Yes, my daughter made mistakes. Yes, she cheated on her husband. But is that a reason to kill her? She was young, foolish. She could have changed her mind and returned to her family. Now I have to bury my only child because of someone's jealousy. Keisha's father, mechanic Walter Harris, struggled to contain his anger. Cheating is despicable, but it's not a reason to shoot someone. He could have filed for divorce, parted ways like human beings. Instead, he took the life of a young woman who wanted to be happy. Antonio's sister, Isabella Rodriguez, came from Detroit. My brother wasn't a saint. He had affairs with married women, but he didn't deserve a bullet in the heart. And now his children are orphans. Their father was killed because of someone else's jealousy. Sitting next to her were her 8 and 11-year-old nephews, who didn't understand why their aunt was crying. Witnesses for the defense tried to soften the image of the defendant. Neighbor Albert Jackson talked about the Harris's family life. Dem loved his wife, planned to have children, was going to buy a house. When he found out about the affair, he just broke down. I don't condone murder, but I understand his pain. Baptist minister Reverend Michael Brown had known the couple for 9 years. They were married in my church and seemed happy. Demetrius called Keisha a blessing from God. Betrayal destroyed his faith in love. Psychiatrist Dr. Sarah Johnson examined the defendant after his arrest. Mr. Harris suffered severe psychological trauma. Betrayal by a loved one can cause a temporary loss of self-control, especially in people with deep emotional attachments. Prosecutor Anderson challenged the claim that it was a crime of passion. The defendant planned his actions for 2 weeks and carried a loaded weapon with him. This was not a spontaneous reaction, but a premeditated act of revenge. The climax came with Demetrius's own testimony. He stood up and looked at the jury. I wasn't going to kill anyone. I came to the parking lot, saw them kissing, and something broke inside me. 9 years of love turned into deception. All my plans for the future, my dreams of children, it all turned out to be a lie. But you could have just left, filed for divorce, said the prosecutor. I could have, I should have. But at that moment, the pain was stronger than my reason. I regret what I did every second. Does that mean you admit your guilt? I killed 2 people. That is my fault. No one else is to blame. In his closing statement, Attorney Clark asked for leniency. Demetrius Harris is not a hardened criminal. He is a man who could not cope with the betrayal of someone very close to him. It was a tragedy, not malicious intent. Prosecutor Anderson demanded a fair punishment. Whatever his motives, the defendant took the lives of 2 young people. Society must be protected from those who solve problems with weapons. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict, guilty of second-degree murder of 2 persons. The jury did not find premeditation, but rejected the version of temporary affect. Judge Thompson sentenced Demetrius Harris to 28 years in prison without the possibility of early release. The defendant committed a serious crime. The court takes into account the circumstances of the case, but human emotions cannot serve as an excuse for murder. The defendant stood motionless as the sentence was read. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he tried to address Keisha's parents. I apologize to the family. Murderer, Gloria Harris shouted, jumping up from her seat. You took our daughter away from us. Burn in hell. Walter Harris held his sobbing wife, his face contorted with hatred. 28 years is not enough for someone like you. My girl will never come back. Antonio's sister shouted after the convoy. And my nephews are left without a father because of you. The guards quickened their pace, leading Demetrius away from the enraged relatives of the victims. A year and a half after the trial, Detective Remy received a call from the Illinois Correctional Facility. Security Chief James Patrick reported an unusual incident. The mother of Harris's victim came to visit him. Gloria Harris. We couldn't refuse her. Formally, she has the right to meet with her relative's killer. And what happened? She yelled at him through the glass for half an hour. The guards were on duty nearby, but they didn't have to intervene. She wasn't threatening him, just talking. What was she yelling about? About her daughter, that he took her only child away from her, that no one gave him the right to judge. Harris just sat and listened, didn't say a word. Then the woman got up and left. And he refused to eat for 3 days after that. The following week, Raimi went to the colony. Demetrius looked haggard, 10 years older. His hands were shaking, his eyes sunken. "Why did she come?" Raimi asked. "To tell the truth," Demetrius replied quietly, "that I'm a murderer, that I took her daughter away from her forever. That cheating is no reason to kill." "And how did you feel?" "That I deserved it. Every word she said was true. Keisha was someone's daughter, not just my unfaithful wife. She had parents who loved her. And I took their child away." Demetrius fell silent and stared at the floor. "She said she would come every month to remind me of who I killed. And I will listen to her, no matter how many years pass.